All right, there's a very, very memorable quote that I like here. And it says that there's a story in your data, but your tools do not know what the story is. And this speaks to the fact that rather than jumping into trying to, know how to use a tool, because there's going to be countless number of tools as as technology gets more advanced. So today it's PowerPoint, tomorrow, Apple could come up with something, Google could come up with something new, software giants to come up with something. But regardless of what technology, comes up with, right? The essence of storytelling is still, a skill set that regardless of the tool, you would know how to use that tool to achieve that goal. So it's not really about the tool, right? It's about knowing how to tell those stories and then leveraging on whatever tools you have, to properly communicate your story. So the tool is, agnostics to whatever you want to do. It doesn't care, you know, how you want to use it, right, to tell those stories. And that's why the emphasis is always about understanding how, to tell the story, understanding what is required, and then using the tool to meet your needs, right? And this is where it's very important. So it's not about, just saying, oh, I know how to use the tool. How do you tell stories without tool? How do you tell those stories? Because your tool cannot do that for you, right? Your tool cannot go into your mind and get what you're trying to communicate and express that for you. So you have to be able to articulate that story in a way that you can now leverage on that tool to push that idea out, right? So this is where it takes you, right? It takes you, the human mind. And this is something that, I really like a quote that I've been hearing recently on technology. So it is human led, tech enabled. So a human being still needs to lead it, to say, this is how I want you to use this tool. This is how I want you to drive, the conversation in this direction, and all of that. Right. So the communicator of the information, has to bring that story visually and contextually to life. Fantastic. All right. So, what are the building blocks to storytelling? What are the building blocks to storytelling? And I've tried to identify four building blocks that we're going to look at. So we're going to look at four blocks. The first block is context, and we're going to get into each of them one after the other. But let me just state them here. So context speaks to what's the surrounding situation, what's the scenario, what has happened for us to start having this conversation. So we talk about the what, the who, the how, right? So who am I talking to? What's my audience? Because the audience, even if I'm presenting the same information, if I have a senior management audience versus I have, an executive team versus I have my own line manager or I have my direct reports, depending on the audience or what we have here as context, right? How I communicate that story would differ, right? The extent to which I, call for support or drive change or I'm forceful or trying to communicate will be a function of who that audience is, right? How much influence they have, how much authority they have. So these are things that comes up when we think about context, right? And all of that. Another building block that we have here is called effective visuals. Let me just write this. So we have number one, context, and then we have effective visuals. Because there's a visual that is effective and a visual that is ineffective, right? For telling certain stories, and we will look at it when we get into the visuals, right? There are visuals that can easily communicate certain things, right? That are designed for certain things. And there are visuals that are not as effective in communicating certain things. You will still try to get that story out, but you're going to require more effort. You're going to have to, do more work, right, to communicate that idea with that visual. So there's an effective visual and there's an ineffective visual, right? Another building block, right, talks about things that we use to focus your audience attention. So what are those things that we can use? Because how we're able to focus our audience attention has a strong impact on what our audience remember. So we will talk about, attentive attributes like use of colors, font size, boldness, things that you can use to draw your attention of your audience. So you put a lot of data on information, but there's something you want your audience to leave, that discussion with, that presentation with, right? And that's what we talk about, focusing your audience's attention. So that's such an important, you know, building block here, because you might use the right visual, and then your audience doesn't really understand what they should be focusing on because they can see a lot of it. So people are picking and choosing what they think is important here. But what we want to be able to do, right, is be able to direct our audience to say, you know what, this is what we want you to look at, right? I can put a rectangle, put some colors, or put something that shows, you know what, this is what I want you to, remember, right? And last but not the least building block here is to avoid clutter, right? So we want to eliminate or remove things that are not relevant. I tell people, if I can remove something from your slide, right, and it doesn't change the message, it doesn't change the context, or what you're trying to communicate, the story, then it's not relevant, right? So anything that your slide can do without, you want to remove them out of your presentation. You want to remove them out because it means that it is unnecessary in the context of what you are trying to achieve, right? Okay, fantastic. So let's start with the details of building blocks in terms of number one, context. So context, what do we mean? Let's dive deeper some more.